Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the CDL podcast channel. In this episode today, as you guys can see by the screen, Brock and I are doing our top 10 Call of Duty players of all time. If you guys enjoy this one, be sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe on YouTube. If you're on the audio platforms, drop a follow, drop a 5-star review. After this, we're going to dive into some Black Ops 6 news. There's been a decent amount of leaks. One of the crazier leaks I can honestly ever remember happening in Call of Duty with some dude just going live on Kick and playing the game on a jailbroken PS4 for quite a long time. So we'll kind of jump into some of that and some of the leaks. Um, and yeah, if you guys enjoy this one, like I said, be sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe. And Brock, how you doing today?
Oh, doing pretty good. It's Monday. It's waiting room for this esports World Cup. Should be fun. Next
Yeah,
coming weeks.
I forgot to look. I saw that the timings were like really weird because I was like, I'm just so used to like we're blessed
Yeah.
being in the US, like times for all the esports tournaments, like understand how blessed we are. They're always like, late afternoon the tournament starts and it's like you're getting home from work and you can pretty much watch from there. Or like worst case, it starts at like 2 o'clock. So like if you're working, you might miss just like a little bit. Like the regular season matches on Friday, they start at like 2 p.m. our time. So you might miss like a match or so, like it live or something. You can go back and watch it. And then like we're just so blessed. I'm just so not used to having to check what time it's going to be because it's going to be like late afternoon or something. But now I'm like, oh shoot, they're in Saudi Arabia. I forget to check the time zone difference. But I thought I saw it was going to be like on in the morning for us, which is just such a different change of pace. And it's like honestly, even if the matches are on, I swear it was like 8 or 9 a.m. And I was like, honestly, that's a lot better than what it is for the UK folks. I think a lot of times they get the matches at like 3 a.m. So
Yeah.
like you have to chalk your next day basically in order to watch matches in that case. But like if the matches are at 9 a.m., obviously you could be busy at work or something. But like a Saturday at 9 a.m., that's easily possible, to watch as compared to like a 3 a.m.
Yeah. Definitely for sure.
So I was like, that's the first time I'm really, we're blessed in the US to be able to always be like in the proper time zone. First time I, ever really thought about that. But yeah, I'm very
Mm,
excited for the World Cup as well.
yep.
Brock, we've been seeing the debates in the timeline. There's been a lot of top 10, top 15, top 25, whatever of all time. A lot of debates going on the timeline. So we're gonna rank our top 10. I want to do our top 10 because while the debate's hot, I kind of want to get into it. And maybe sometime in the off season when we have like a little bit more time to really dive into everything. This debate kind of came up out of the blue more recently. It always tends to come around this champs time when new players, either players get their first rings or people add on to their ring collection and starts to wonder if somebody's going to crack the top 10. And I believe we had at least one new player potentially crack the top 10 according to a lot of people. Maybe some people don't believe so. We'll get into that in a little bit, but we're just gonna do our top 10 for today. We'll maybe mention our honorable mentions, but I think later in the offseason, maybe Brock will do a top 25 when we can really like deep dive and like give a lot more reason behind it and like
Yeah.
really get a lot behind it because like the top 10 for the most part, I would say there's only like 11 or 12 players that are mixed into people's top 10 when you're ranking just like greatest of all time, a combination of achievements as well as individual skill because obviously there has to be some balance um, between the two, but it gets a lot more muddy. It's honestly harder to rank 11 through 25 than it is the top 10.
hmm Yeah.
For the most part, the top 10 is just you jumbling around the 10 players in whatever order you believe they go in.
Yeah. It gets a little, stinky there.
Yeah, I mean, outside the top 10, 11 through 25, it's like, do you rank in the older players as much? Like the big debate was like people were shocked when they saw like Big Timer in at like 21 on the post that like the CDL Scrim Intel and Brian Stats and those guys are doing. And it's like,
Yeah.
well, for like a 6 year period, Big Timer was like the winningest player. And like his ratio of like wins in tournaments is actually kind of absurd. Did you see that?
I didn't. I might
His
have, but I don't remember.
I mean, Big T pro events 25. He made the finals in 13 of them and won 9 of those. So he was 9-4 in finals. He made the finals
Jeez.
in over 50% of the events he attended, average placing of 3.5. He won in 4 different titles and also placed third. And like people were saying, well, plumber era and whatever, but like he was playing against the complexity dynasty. He was playing against all the players that are ranked as the greatest of all time, like Hecz, Crim,
hmm
Karma. He was playing all of these people.
Yeah.
Clayster, like all these guys that are towards the top. He was like playing and battling and winning against these guys. I mean, making the finals in over 50% of your tournaments is just absurd.
Yeah, it's pretty dang good, I'd say.
But then there are people that argue like, he retired in the middle of Ghosts, so like he didn't even make it into the jetpack era. And to me, that's a valid argument as well. Like if you want to make that argument that like he didn't play deep enough and he played way too early on, it's like okay, I can see that argument. But I don't know. That's why the people outside the top 10 get like so I don't know. It's so tough because like there are people like Hydra that probably haven't cracked the top 10 yet, but like eye test wise, you can see talent wise, Hydra could easily be top 5 or better all time,
Mhm.
but he
Yeah.
just doesn't have like the accolades yet to stack up. I mean, he has a ring and like 5 championships, so those are amazing accolades. But like, it's hard to compare him to a guy like, even like a guy like Formal, who has like 20 wins in a ring, or
Mhm.
any of these people with 2 rings and more wins than him. It's like individual skill wise, I think Hydra stacks up there with the best of them, but you have to factor in their individual peak as well as the length of their peak, um, and rings.
Mhm. Yeah, I definitely have to agree.
All right, Brock. I think we should just jump on into it. Kind of, I mean, we basically just set our criteria. Our criteria is heavily involved on winning and also individual peak. So we'll give some explanation as to maybe why some guys were left off the list. But Brock, you want to start us off and give your number 10 player in your top 10 Call of Duty players all time?
My number 10, it's hard leaving some of these players off. I don't
I
wanna
know.
leave them off.
I know. And if you're wondering why the screen looks like this, we put two because obviously, like, guys like, well, this is no spoiler, but like somebody like Crimsix, both of us are gonna have Crim in our top 10, so I just need the two pictures to be able to slide up there in each of our individual lists.
Mhm. Alright. My number 10 spot my number 10 spot is shottzyy.
Okay, you're putting them up there. I'm glad because that means we're gonna have a different top 10. I was really hoping we didn't just drop the same top 10.
I put him up there for the fact, he has 2 rings, and one was, of course, online. He has wins. Some of them were online, but just the way he plays the game, it's so unique, and I don't think the way he, like, goes for risk all the time, you don't really see all of these other players doing it. I just
Yeah,
kinda gotta tip that.
I'm pulling up the little like snapshot player cards here for these players that we're listing, for the most part. And I mean, Shotzzy does have 7 tournament wins, 13 finals appearances, so 7 and 6 in the finals, wins across 3 different titles. He's got the 2 rings, obviously, an average placement of 3.9, 32 events. So yeah, like you said, he's got a number of wins, the 2 rings. His playstyle is super unique. I certainly think he's right on the edge. Uh,
Mhm,
I think I probably am putting him at my 11 or 12 spot. I don't think it's at all crazy to put him at 10. I know some people, like I saw, I believe in CDL Scrim and Tells, they put him at 11, in that like list they're doing. And people were like, oh my God, it's like too soon. Like this is recency bias and all that. But like, I don't know. I see both sides. Like I see the longevity argument because that's kind of the argument I have with Paco is like
yeah.
I think Paco probably cracks like the Paco's definitely in the top 20 all time, I'd say. I feel like he's in like the low teens, like
Mhm,
17, 18, 19, maybe somewhere in there. And it's just a longevity thing. Like obviously, I think we should do that sometime, bro. Like in the offseason. We should do like a top 10, just purely talent, like
yeah,
individual, just like
definitely.
mechanical skill that we've ever seen. Cause like if that was a list, to me, the peak I've seen from Hydra, I think Hydra might be top 5 mechanical skill I've ever just like laid eyes on.
Mhm, yeah.
But that doesn't necessarily always translate into the greatest player of all time because there are factors such as longevity that have to go into it, which is maybe my argument for why I wouldn't have Shotzzy in my top 10. But at the same time, also Shotzzy came in MW 19 and like his career has been like 5 plus years long now, with the
Mhm,
2 wins. And like people are going to say like a guy like Akes, Akes obviously playing in like Black Ops 1, but really like he was winning in Black Ops 1. Um, into MW3 where they didn't play as much, and then into BO2, like BO2, Ghost, the 3 jetpack games in World War II, and then Akes was pretty much done with any good placements after like World War II champs. After that, Black Ops 4 was a nightmare, and MW19 was a nightmare. So he was done with good placements. So like Black Ops 2 to World War II was a 6 year span. Shotzi's played 5 games. So like that Aches peak was about like 6 years, and even in that so-called peak. Like Black Ops 3 was rough, IW was rough. Um, there were some tough games in there for him. So like, I don't know. Like shottzyy seems like such a new player, but he is 5, 6 years deep into his COD career at this point, which is crazy to think about.
I know it kind of baffles me too how he does have 5 years, and I'm thinking he does not have like that much.
He just seems like a young gun, but it's like, damn, actually, dude's been in the league for a good amount of time now. Like he's been in the league for really, he is like vet status at this point. Like he's been in the league a lot longer than a lot of guys, and he's been pretty much at like a peak because he's been a top player every year he's been in the league. So he's
Hmm.
pretty much been at a peak now for like 5+ years of being one of the better submachine gun players in the game. So he definitely deserves his flowers there. Brock, I'm going a different direction though. I think my number 10 is a player that I thought was maybe going to get kicked to like 11 or 12. He was dangling onto the top 10 spot, but I'm going to keep him there. I'm putting JCap at number 10 for me. He's always been, since like Crim and Karma were able to get their third rings and, other people joined the 2 rings club. Cap's always been somebody just because of individual peak skill. I do feel like probably of all the players I'll put in the top 10, I
Hmm.
think Cap's individual skill is probably the lowest, but that's not to say Cap was bad or anything. It's just it's always what's kept him in like the back half of the top 10 as opposed to probably cracking like the top 5.
Yeah,
But it's not a mistake that JCap made grand finals in BO2 as well as all 3 jetpack games and came close a number of other times. Like his World War II team was pretty good. He came close plenty of times in other titles. And JCap, I mean, the dude just knows how to win. He's very similar in a way to Kenny. Like he inserts into a team, he just knows how to win. He just has like coach in game type play style. Obviously, got another ring as a coach with LAT in Vanguard. Dude just knew how to win. I feel like he gets a lot of hate because towards the tail end of his career and really like even in those jetpack games when he was going to every finals, he was not a superstar on his team by any means. He had Apathy and John just absolutely slaying out on the sub. Slasher was a superstar in a lot of those jetpack games, and JCap was just the glue guy. Um,
hmm,
but it's not a mistake that his team made 3 straight grand finals. Like he made every jetpack finals. It's not a mistake.
yeah,
So I have JCap at 10. Once again, the individual skill, maybe some people will argue, but he made it to 23 finals, winning 9 of them, and has wins across 5 different titles, obviously with 2 rings, average placement of about 6th, which once again, those guys that played a ton before the CDL era, their average placements are going to be skewed, most
yep.
likely down just because of how many teams are at the tournaments. Also, Cap 9 and 14 in finals. I would love to know how many of those losses are to the Optic Dynasty.
A lot.
Of those 14 losses, it's got to be at least 6+ were to the Optic Dynasty, I would bet.
Hmm. They always had a
Not many people
battle
are beating
playing
that team.
them.
Exactly. Not many people are beating that team.
Yeah.
All right, Brock, where are you going for number 9? I'm assuming that means you probably left Cap off your list, huh?
Yeah, I left low key some of these players off that probably should be to some people, but it's my
Would you
list.
have would you have Cap like right outside 11, 12, somewhere in there?
Yeah, I would.
Okay. I was wondering because I didn't know if you dropped him a little further because some people use that individual skill argument against him, but it's like once again, like the individual skill argument for Cap, I swear people like only watched MW19 when he was just like basically on his way out and they're like he sucked and it's like you just don't make it to 4 champs grand finals and just not have thumbs. It's not how
Hmm.
that works.
Yeah. All right. Huh. My number 9 spot is Mr. Tyler Abizi.
Okay.
I just, he's been dominating the last 4 years, so called. So we'll call you want to call it domination. Get second a lot, first, second. Does have 10 tournament wins. Does have a little more finals losses than some of the other players. But the way he plays is just like you said, kind of like not the kind of exact opposite of shottzyy. He just gets in there. Shottzyy does his weird stuff, but Tyler Abizi just kind of straight up gunfight, get a kill, and tell
Yeah.
you how you play with him.
Abizi's just gonna chow you. And the crazy thing about Abizi too is like we talked about like the big timer, over 50% of his tournaments he made finals. Abizi's the same way, which is honestly even more absurd in this current era. Although, like, you can make the argument like big timer, maybe not as many good teams. Although, like, even this year, like, really, there's only 4 good teams. So that argument's a little bit invalid at times. But like with a BZ, regardless of what era you play in, making 25 of 45 finals, especially because like there's a lot of those events like in World War II when he was playing on just terrible teams where he obviously wasn't making finals, like his technical like rookie year, he was on like E6 and like random teams where
Hmm.
it it just like makes it look absurd. His average placement is a 7.29, and I like looked like a million times to make sure that was incorrect, and I'm pretty sure it is correct. Uh Scrim and Tell posted that one, and I was like 7.29 seems absurd considering he's made finals in over half the tournament. So that means he's minimum place second in over half of his tournaments, and he also placed first in 10. So like,
Hmm.
how is he 7.29? But he had like some crazy bad finishes in World War II that just like drag his overall placement down so much. But yeah, I mean, what more can you say about a BZ, Brock? I agree with you. I also had him at 9.
Yep.
I
He
have him below
just.
Simp because once again, like they have basically the same accolades. I just put Simp. To me, Simp has always been the better player, and that's
Yep.
not a bash on a BZ because a BZ is absolutely absurd. And I
Hmm.
do acknowledge that a BZ probably plays the tougher role. I don't know why. I just like I've always just Simp has always been the better player to me. And if you say a BZ is the better player, I do understand it. Like the guy is insane, but to me, he's at number 9. I just feel like he's had a couple more years where it's like especially Vanguard, where it's like, I don't know, BZ just isn't like that dude. And the World War II year does hurt him, but it's hard to fault him for it because, I mean, he was playing with bad teams, so there's only so much you can do.
Yeah, I agree. Like I said, his Vanguard was a tough one, but still very good player.
Yeah, and even in his so-called tough year in Vanguard, he was better than a lot of players.
Yeah, still def 1.0 KDs
Yeah,
considered bad.
yeah. Brock, I think honestly, our list from here on out might look pretty similar. Who do you have at number 8?
I have this guy called Kenny.
Yep, I have the same thing.
I I was looking at both their stats. I mean, yeah, Abizi is really good and all, but Kenny has been doing it for longer, and the same amount of rings and same amount of basic championships.
Yeah, I was like, I can see the argument for a BZ being in front of Kenny. There's obvious bias, I think, here for both of us. I mean,
Yeah.
everybody knows that like you're a Kenny fan. I'm like the Kenny fan.
Mhm.
Um, Kenny's my favorite player, but like I agree with you. The big thing that it comes down to me for Kenny is just the winning. They have him and BZ have the same amount of tournament wins. The difference is, Kenny's 10-6 in finals, BZ's 10-15. So
Yeah.
Kenny converts his finals at a lot better rate, 10-6. He almost converts his finals at a 2-to-1 ratio, and Abizi's 10-15. So he has 9 more losses, but the same amount of wins. They have the same amount of rings. They both have 2. Kenny's won across 5 titles, whereas Abizi has also won across 5. Kenny's attended 5 more tournaments, which also seems so weird that Kenny's only attended 5 more tournaments, but really, like, Kenny technically played in AW, but his, like, air quote rookie year was World War II as well, so they kind of came up at the same time. For me, I think a big factor in this, you could also make the argument though that Abizi making 9 extra finals, even though their losses, is a plus to Abizi because he's been in that many more finals than Kenny.
Mhm.
I will say, however, though, for me at least, Kenny, it's just I think he's had a lot tougher road to these
Yep.
wins because Abizi, World War II, obviously bad teams, but then instantly he's on a BO4 team that has Simp, Arcitys, Prestinni, Clay. Like his first like team, he was just dropped on. Obviously, Simp wasn't on it right away, but he had Cap, who at the time was coming off 3 straight grand finals at champs. Like he had Clayster, JCap, Prestinni, and Arcitys on his team
Mhm.
off the rip, his first like true good pro team, he had those players, and then when they dropped JCap, he had Simp. So basically, his entire career, he's teamed with Simp, who's been probably the best player of the past 5 years overall. And then he got to team with Clayster, one of the greatest players of all time, a top 5 player. Pristini, a very good player. Arcides, another probably top 15 player of all time. And even since then, like the other guys he's teamed with, Celium, one of the most consistent slayers of all time, maybe the most consistent. Slasher, another top 15 player all time. Like this dude has just teamed with so many good players. Whereas Kenny, when he got his really like his first team in World War II. He got Accuracy, who was a pretty unproven player. Chino, who was basically just like a throwaway player that really nobody wanted to team with. And Theory, who was like basically like running on fumes of his career.
Yeah, he just what was that? He dropped a point like 7 in like both finals that they won or something like that.
Yeah, in both tournaments, I think overall. He was
Yeah,
like a point
turn.
7, point 8. And that was Kenny's sub duel.
Yep.
Like Kenny just like was a hard carry for those teams. Now, don't get me wrong, Accuracy and Chino were also very nasty at that game, especially early on.
With the FG 42.
Like, put some respect at Accuracy and Chino. They were both very good at that game, especially early on. And we're bashing Theory, but he was clearly doing enough for his teams to win. Like, even though he didn't have the best numbers, like if your team is winning majors, especially in an era like that where it's tough to win, like you're clearly doing something right in the map. Um, if you're Theory, but Kenny has just had a tougher road. Like he had that team, they went through roster changes. He was able to win. BO4, he gets put on a good team, but like he's had some teams where it's like he's had to go through a lot of changes and play with new players and learn how to adapt to new play styles. Whereas a guy like Abizi has just been on the same core team that's insanely talented and been on the most talented team. Abizi's been on the most talented team pretty much every year since BO4.
Yep.
So
And
I don't
that
know. That's
and,
more of an uphill battle for Kenny.
yeah, and that Kenny year with OGL LA was a rough one.
Absolutely. I also will say though, if you're gonna argue like he has more finals and like the individual peak, I certainly think you could say Abizi's individual peak, just purely individual skill, is higher than Kenny's. I think you're probably right. I don't
Hmm.
know, just the winning aspect. And when we're talking greatest of all time, the winning aspect and like the way they've done it really does come into play a lot because once again, this isn't just an individually mechanically skilled top 10 of all time. Kenny is certainly up there and the most mechanically skilled players ever, but like this list isn't just purely based on individual skill. There's a lot of factors in here, including, the big thing for when you're ranking the greatest of all time is winning and how
Yep.
you affect winning. Kenny
Mm-hmm.
certainly affects winning very well for his teams.
Mm-hmm.
I hope we don't go the same the rest of the way out, Brock. Who you have at 7?
I have Simp.
I have the same thing. I have Simp at 7. I was thinking we're gonna be pretty similar, but then when you went shottzyy 10, I was like, maybe we're gonna be different. Why do you have Simp at 7?
uh, for the fact, Simp and they have 2 rings each. Him, Kenny, and BZ. But the eyeball test to me, just watching Simp throughout the years, is he has 2 MVP awards in the CDL era, and just the eyeball test for me, just he's like the best player I've ever seen, besides Scump, really, for me at least.
Yeah, I would probably agree with you. I think Simp maybe individual talent wise, just peak and like some of the things I've seen. I still think he might be the greatest player I've ever watched with my own two eyes, like just like individual talent wise.
Hmm.
I still think I don't know, like you said, Scump's up there. I feel like peak Crimsix is up there. I still think a guy like Hydra, the peaks I've seen from him, he's up there with the most talent I've seen. Formal's peaks are up there. Abizi's peaks. Like, there's a lot of guys whose peaks are like up there for just purely mechanically, like the highest peak I've seen. I still think it's Simp though, and for how long he's been doing it now. BO4, like literally, Simp is like basically had a chance to be considered like best player in the game at pretty much every game he's played. There maybe you could say like there's a period over like that Vanguard MW2 era where he was like having to play more objective and not able to like kind of just do his thing as much, where he wasn't like right up there as the absolute best, but like I mean, shoot, even in those when he was doing that, he was still putting up numbers like Simp is. Yeah, I would agree with you.
Yeah,
Potentially the best player I've seen.
yeah, could be high
Just
in the list.
talent.
Could be high on the list if he won more finals, which could probably include having one more chip at least.
Yeah, and like I mean, that's definitely an argument. Like you can be like, well, how do you have him ahead of Kenny if you don't have a BZ? And it's just like weird. Like they have the same amount of wins, and I don't know. Like the big difference is to me like Simp has the 2 MVPs, um, and honestly, Simp probably has 3. Like if they were to give out an MVP for Black Ops 4, it probably goes to Simp.
Yeah.
So like Simp has like 2, potentially maybe even 3 MVPs in like 6 or 7 years of competing.
Hmm.
Yeah, I it's It's tough. I just think he's ahead of Kenny just because once again, individual peak like I think comes into play here more than Abizi just because of the two regular season MVPs, the champs MVP, the same amount of rings. Like once again, if it's hard for me to argue Kenny over him just because the individual peak for Simp is so high with the double MVPs, but I understand like if you're saying that this hurts our Kenny over Abizi argument, I can see why you say that, and I can still see why Abizi over Kenny. I just think Kenny affects winning more than Abizi, and I think Simp just I think Kenny can affect winning more than Simp potentially. I think he maybe brings more leadership wise, but Simp just like you can't deny just the multi MVPs that he has. Just the dude is unreal. And like you said, when we're talking talent, I still think Simp might be the best talent I've ever seen. So it's really, really hard to, ever put anybody over him in that specific category.
Yeah. And when he got dropped on the E United team, they basically were like a stone cold finals team besides like that one tournament, I believe.
Yeah, they lost like one. I think they lost like London to 100T in finals.
Yeah.
Um,
Like the greatest roster midseason roster ever.
yeah, it literally probably the greatest, and it's funny because it dropped Pap, who I have on my list, but he was getting towards the tail end of his career at that point, and he actually bounced back decently with EG at champs that year. They should have beat United.
Yeah.
We talk about that a lot. They should have beat them.
Yep.
All right, Brock, who you got at number 6? I'm thinking we have the same player here.
I think we have the same player here. Is it Aches?
Yep, it's got to be Patty P.
Yep, has
Kind of
20
upset we have the
tournament
same
wins.
list. Kind of upset we have the same list me right now, but I think it's pretty. I think we might go different on the next one, but yeah. What are you gonna say about Aches?
So he had 20 tournament wins, 2 rings. Optic Killer, sorry, those are Optic fans. Just I
Yeah.
didn't really get to see him in his, I guess. I don't remember a lot of his prime, but I just know that he was very good on those teams.
Also,
Very,
one
very
thing
good.
else, one thing that's big about Aches, he converts his wins. 20-7 in the finals is a very, very good record.
Hmm.
Um, 2 rings, obviously, one of the rings being maybe the most improbable ring ever. That the tournament run where EG nobody expected them to win it in World War II, and he was able to get it done. I think Aches probably towards the back half of the top 10. I think maybe he would take over like JCap's spot and maybe like Shottzy's spot for you. I think Aches would maybe be like 10. He wasn't able to get that second ring, but that second ring like really establishes himself in a crazy club. 20 wins and 2 rings. There are very, very few people um in that club of 20 rings or 20 wins and 2+ rings. Clay actually technically isn't even that. He has 19 tournament wins according to COD Gamepedia. Um, Formal doesn't make it because he has the 1 ring. Scump doesn't because he has the 1 ring. So it's really Crim, Karma, and Aches are the only members of that club. Now, COD Gamepedia only has Aches listed at 17 wins, but we know it's actually 20. So maybe Clayster is off. Maybe Clay technically has 20, but they only have Clay listed as 19. So if that Clay one is correct, that means that the only members of the 2+ rings and 20+ wins is Aches, Crim, and Karma.
Mm.
So yeah, Aches once again, when you're talking about just like affecting winning, there was a point where this guy literally couldn't lose. Like that complexity team, they just would win every tournament.
Yep.
Um, Aches knows how to win, affects winning, just the absolute confidence. One of the most important people in the scene of all time. There are so many people that hate him, but he is one of the most important players of all time in the scene because he created that like air quote, villain in the optic story that was so needed, and he made it so entertaining, and he played that role so damn well.
Hmm.
So Aches deserves a lot of credit for the growth of Call of Duty because, like, as much as people like to hate on him, like, if you didn't have him to hate on as an optic fan in that period, like, he was the thing keeping the show going, and otherwise it would just be all optic love and nothing else. And Aches was like there to be the villain in that story, and we couldn't have asked for a better dude. Also, Aches would never like to say it, but like I talked about this before. My friend and I, when I went to Champs at BO4, we met him just chilling at Whole Foods. We were talking to him for a little bit. Super cool dude, super nice. Um, he would just never like you to know it because he likes to play the villain on camera.
Yep.
But he's a super cool dude,
Hmm.
and an even more excellent player. I think, Brock. I think there's a lot of people listening to this that are like still probably so dumbfounded that Aches is like up here because like towards the tail of his career, like tail end of his career, he didn't try that much.
Yeah.
Like Honestly, like, I feel like watching him in, like, BO3, I feel like from that point on until, like, World War II, he didn't, like, try. I feel like in BO3, half the time he wasn't trying. I feel like in IW, he wasn't. And then World War II, I feel like once he got his team changed, like, towards champs time, he tried. But, like, I swear and he even talks about, like, how he didn't take it as serious as he should have, and he thinks he could have been even a lot better, but, um, unfortunately for him, he probably burned a lot of bridges with, like, just how crazy he was in his villain arc. And
Hmm.
who knows if he went to burned all those bridges potentially, like he maybe he joins Optic in that sale when they bought the whole team and ended up just keeping Crim and Karma. Um, who knows? But Aches certainly deserving of a top 10 spot, and I think it's going to take quite some time for Aches to be dethroned out of the top 10,
Yeah,
if ever. Who knows?
yeah, he does. That's a crazy good finals record.
Well, and people don't talk about his peak enough. Like BO2, Ghost, Aches, even a little bit into that beginning of AW when they were winning, like he could just take over maps. Like he was one of the best individual players in the game as well.
Hmm. It's crazy to think that, like, what people who, if they just started watching the CDL era, they'd probably think he's a burger.
He's the worst KD in the CDL era from those few matches he played, and like even honestly BO3 on he had like a lot of stinker series. Wasn't like that takeover player, but dude, I mean early AW and even like AW and before like Aches, he was different breed. He was so good.
Hmm.
This is where I think we may split off, Brock. Who do you have at number 5?
5, I have Clayster.
We did split off here. I'll let you go in on why you think Clayster is number 5, and then I'll go over who I have number 5.
Clayster, to me, like I said, he has 3 championships. Does he really have 19 wins? I thought he had more wins.
That's what COD Gamepedia is telling me. I'm trying to find like a different source. That's what it's saying, 19 wins, but yeah, that's what it's saying. I mean, I guess it makes sense because he definitely missed out on some of those complexity wins when they picked up Karma.
Yeah.
So he
So,
definitely missed out on some of those, and then, like, he obviously did, like he did have the long drought, remember, from, like, AW until BO4,
oh, yeah, mhm.
where he didn't win, then he won a couple in BO4, won some in MW as well as the champs, but then he hasn't won unless I'm missing one, he hasn't won since MW 19 champs.
Yeah.
So, like, he's gone on 2 huge droughts, like, am I wrong, or has he I don't think he's won since
Or so,
MW 19 champs.
I think you're. Yeah, he hasn't.
'Cause he made a finals in Cold War, and
That
then,
they didn't win that one.
they lost, and then the Vanguard year was just a mess for him. And then
Then
MW2, they didn't
Vegas.
get close, yeah, and then this past year, they didn't get close. So, yeah, I don't think he's won since MW19
That's crazy.
champs.
Yeah, for some reason I thought he had more wins, but yeah, has three world championships. Pretty mainstay AR of his time. Back in the day, he's pretty good, and he's been playing for like so many years at this point. Which I gotta tip that.
Yeah, one of the few players, and not he didn't win the same team, but one of the few players to go back to back
Hmm.
all time because he won BO4 and MW19, the rings back to back. One of the few players to do back to back champs wins of all time. I'm off the top of my head, I mean Karma, BO2, and Ghost. And other than that, has anybody else won back to back? Apathy made it to. Apathy's kind of an absurd one because he made it to 3 straight finals, also like Cap. He didn't win back to back though because he lost IW in between his 2 wins.
I don't think anyone else has won back to back.
Crim didn't either. Cap didn't. Shottzyy didn't. Of all like the 2 ring people, I believe, unless I'm missing one, I think it's Karma and Clay are the only 2 to win back to back rings.
Yeah.
So you have Clay at 5, Brock. I'm assuming who I have at 5 is who you have at 4. Then I have Formal at 5.
Hmm.
I think the individual peak, I like Formal over Clay. I think Formal's peak because I think like Formal's peak is one of the best peaks ever in COD. Like the dude was unquestionable best main AR. Like the other guy that was up in the conversation would be like Octane and Slasher during that era, and like Formal would just shut the 2 of them down every time they played in a big match for the most part.
Hmm.
Um, Formal does have more wins according to COD Gamepedia with 23 as opposed to Clayster's 19. However, Clayster also I feel like has an underrated peak because once again he's been playing for so long that I feel like people don't view him as good as he actually is, because like the last few years haven't been as good for him as he's continued to play into the CDL era.
Yeah.
I think Clay had an extremely high peak as well. Though, like AW Clay at Champs, that boy was a different breed. Formal, obviously. I mean, IW Champs is like formal IW Champs might be the most talked about legendary player of all time.
Yep. It's
I have
incredible.
formal, yeah, I have formal at 5 because I just think like accolades wise they're roughly the same. I think formal had a higher peak, but Clay's peak is nothing to just be like thrown away. And the 2 rings is just what really separates it for me.
Yeah.
Since the wins are very similar, it's tough for me to get over the 2 rings that Clay has over him. They play the same role, main AR. Like I think it's weird because I think like if I'm starting a team, I think I'm taking formal over Clay. But we're talking greatest of all time. It's like you're talking about the accolades as well in there. And with the roughly the same everything else in terms of accolades, Clay has the 2 rings over him. I have to go Clay, which is where I'm going with my number 4 spot. And I'm assuming that means you're going formal at number 4.
Yeah. I went number 4 with formal.
Okay, so I'll put him up there for you then if you want to give any rationale as to why you put him over Clay. Once again, I think it's a toss up. I don't think you can go wrong either way. I just went for the rings for Clay, considering everything else is pretty similar.
For me, I don't know. When I thought about it, I just thought about like I weighed those two, like how good they've been, and just more in the way like I did factor in some like peaks here and there, and like for me personally, just watching formal and watching Clay in the day, it
Yep.
just I would just eyeball test. Would want formal on my team.
It's weird because it sounds like counterintuitive what I'm saying, but I agree with you. I think peak. I do agree with you. I think formal's peak is better, but it's like so weird because that's why the greatest of all time discussion is so weird
Mm-hmm.
because like it's like accolades. Like accolades have to play a factor because that's like what greatness is. Like greatness is a lot of times defined by how much you win in like a sport or something. So it's like I don't know. It's just so tough for me. Like I agree. I think formal individually is more talented, but like it's the same way that I think Simp is probably individually more talented than every player I just put ahead of him.
Yeah.
But like the amount of losses he has in the finals and just like the I don't know, like the longevity these guys had, and like a couple of them have more rings than him and just more tournament wins. It's hard for me to put him ahead. Like once again, if we're going individual talent, I think Formal might crack like my top 3 or 4. The accolades for me for Clay were just too much, especially the rings. But I can't argue with if you have Formal ahead of him because of the individual peak. It all kind of depends on what you weigh a little heavier.
Mm-hmm. And I don't know. I don't really think this counts into this Call of Duty stuff, but Formal did like come from Halo to COD, and Clay's been
Yeah.
just COD, but that doesn't really matter in this argument,
Yeah, it
really.
doesn't matter in this argument because for me, I mean, shottzyy would crack into the greatest esports career. shottzyy would definitely crack into the top 10 and maybe pretty high for me also because it's insane to
Hmm.
win a ring in multiple games. It's just absurd to do. shottzyy and Formal, obviously the two guys to do that. Um, and we'll talk about who we have in our maybe like 11 through 15 roughly. And I think we should do that, Brock. We should mark it down as one of our ideas to do in the offseason. I think we should do just pure individual peaks eye test who we believe were like the top 10 like players we've ever seen with an eye test or something.
Yeah.
I think this list would drastically change in some ways. But although like a lot of these players, they I mean like a Beezy's peak that we saw might be up there. Like shottzy's peak was super high. Formal, Clay, Aches, Simp, like all these guys, Kenny, they all had insanely high peaks. So they still might make the list, just might be a slightly different order. Cause like I think in that case, I'd probably put IW Formal over any form of Clay.
Hmm.
I feel like Clay does get hurt by how long he's played. Like we talk about how longevity matters in a good way, but I feel like there's some cases like that are special where like Clay's longevity has actually hurt him in some people's mind because he's had a few years now where he's like hanging around. He's good enough to be in the league and like his teams are decent, but they're never like great. So I feel like some people are starting to view him as just like not that good of a player for how many years now because his teams aren't like close to winning. So it's actually almost his longevity is almost hurting him in a way where he's still pretty good, but he's not winning.
Yeah, I just see the argument. Been on pretty subpar teams.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Brock. Now we are to our top 3. I'm assuming we have the same top 3, the Optic Dynasty trio that's left. I'm curious because I honestly, for a long time, have thought the top 3 goes in a specific order, but I think I might go in a different direction with it. I don't know. I just don't know where to go. Who do you have at 3?
Uh, man.
It's so
Eh,
tough.
For me, for me in my list, I'm putting Karma at 3.
Okay, I like that because then I'm gonna put Scump at 3.
Mhm.
Is for me, it's a toss up, but I think that narrative that we both went with fits for our list then, and I think it's perfect.
Yeah.
Because like you leaned into a little bit more talent, and I would agree with you. I think Scump's talent peak is higher than Karma's, and then with mine putting Clay over Formal, I leaned a little bit more into the overall accolades. Where just like the Formal and Crim debate, Formal has a little bit more wins, or Formal and Clay. Sorry, Formal has a little bit more wins than Clay, but Clay has the rings. Kind of like in this debate, Scump has a little bit more wins, 6 more wins than Karma, but Karma has the 2 rings over him.
Yep.
And also, Karma's peak is nothing to just scoff at. Like Karma's peak was up there
He
among the best of all time.
he was nasty.
Yeah. So I went with Scump at 3, you went with Karma at 3. Pretty much the same debate really that we just had with Clay and Formal is how we both went with it.
Yeah. It was literally like a toss up, but I put Karma at 3.
Once again, like to me, I mean, do you want to just finish our list here? I then put Karma at 2. I'm assuming you put Scump at 2.
Yeah, I put Scump at 2, and then we both
And
have
we
Crim at 1.
Yeah. So like to me, the way that this shakes out, I believe like so I think like your bottom half of your top 10, I think Aches has to be 6 and I think Simp, Abeezy and Kenny have to be included.
Mhm.
So I think Aches has to be 6. I think Simp has to be 7. I think Abeezy and Kenny can be interchanged 8 and 9 and then I think
Yep.
your 10 spots up for debate. But I think the top 9 are locked in for me.
Yeah.
It's the Optic Dynasty, Clay and Aches, and then the Tiny Terrors and Kenny. I think that top 9 has to be in your top 10. And I think there's a very big debate between like JCap, shottzyy, Arcitys, Apathy, Slasher, maybe even like Octane. I think those guys all have cases for
Mhm.
like that 10 spot.
Yeah, I would agree.
I mean, we didn't really mention it, but like, I think Krim is the number one because it's undisputed. Most wins, tied for the most rings. Also, his individual peak as well. Like best player in Ghost, top player in Black Ops 2. He was insane at all the jetpack games. Um, Even into World War 2, he was very good at that game, despite the team not being that good. Krim was very good at World War 2. Even into Black Ops 4, he had his struggles. People like to bash him, but he was still pretty good overall in that game. MW19, he wins champs MVP. Still super good in that game. Going into Cold War, team has a bunch of issues, but he's still solid. Vanguard was a rough year for him, and then it kind of started to trail off. But even in his like so-called rough years, the last couple ones, he was still like an average or better player,
Mhm.
playing forever. Just the epitome of knowing how to win. He was the guy, the winner.
Yep, literally.
Um, is this the way that you think about the top 10 though? Like I said, Ace 6, Simp 7, BZ and Kenny interchangeable 8 and 9. I think those guys are the 6 through 9. 10's up
Yep.
for debate. And then I think the way that the top 5 shakes out, I think Clay and Formal have to be 4 and 5 in whatever order you want them. I don't think they
Mhm.
can either of them can go higher. And then I think Scump and Karma have to be 2 and 3 in whatever order you want them to be in, and then Crim has to be 1.
Yeah, I would. Mhm.
That's the way I look at it. I think Crim has to be 1. And now once again, I guess the only argument you could make if you purely want to go the 3 ring club deserves to be top 3, maybe you can put Clay over Scump, but like the tournament wins start to become a lot. It's 11 more tournament wins for Scump than Clay. And once again, like Scump's individual peak is maybe the highest once again that we've seen of any player. Like the dude was literally a top player from the moment he stepped on the scene until the moment he left.
Yeah,
And there's
he left dropping 1.2s, 1.2s.
I don't know that there's another player that I can think of that is a retired player that came into the scene on top, was on top for every game essentially, and left the scene as one of the top players still. I don't
Mhm.
know there's another player you can say that for, really, in like, because even guys like Krim, he was still good at the end, but he wasn't a top player. Karma was not a top player. He was like still good in BO4, and he was struggling in MW because he wasn't trying. Even Formal kind of lost the passion. He wasn't. He was still a good player, but he wasn't like a top player. uh, in Cold War at the end, where Scump was top player wire to wire. He was one of the top players. His individual peak and just I think he's ahead of Clay just because I just think also early on the team Scump had
Yeah.
not nearly as good as the teams that some of these guys were. Like Crim was on an amazing team his entire career. Same with Karma for the most part.
Also, like, well, we talked about in the past how Scump's never really had a second sub for most of his career.
Yeah, a lot of his career, he really didn't get like a true sub duo. Like the Dynasty, like Crim and Formal, both mainly ARs. Karma more of a flex, really, like not like a true sub. But
Yeah.
you're not wrong. He really didn't have like a true sub duo. Like the first sub duo he had in so long was when Tej joined.
Yep. BO4.
Because then they went the extreme route. They gave him Methods, Octane, and Crim. They gave him like truly no sub duo at all.
Yeah. That was a
And
rough year.
then he finally got a sub duo in Tej, and then that turned into um, the huntsmen team where he was playing with Envoy for a bit, and then eventually shottzyy.
Hmm.
Envoy was a weird fit with him as well.
Yeah, but just hit the flank.
It was a weird fit with Scump.
Yeah.
That's our top 10. We essentially have the same thing, Brock. We were different at 10. We went 9 down to 6 the same. We flipped 4 and 5, and then we had the same top 3. So I think the top 5 is pretty much undebatable. I mean, I would say the only players with a chance to break into that top 5 would be the Tiny Terrors and Kenny. Maybe shottzyy, I guess, if shottzyy were to win, another ring or something.
Hmm.
We would definitely start having that conversation. But like active players, Arcitys is right outside the top 10. So I guess if he were to come back in the league and start winning rings again, he would have a case. Maybe a guy like Selim, if all of a sudden he just starts winning rings. Hydra, maybe down the road, has a chance if he starts winning a ton. Um, Other than that, like I don't know, there are like players with talent and stuff, but it's hard. The only guys that are even remotely close to cracking into the top 5 right now would be like the Tiny Terrors and Kenny and maybe shottzyy. Then guys maybe to look down the road would be like a Hydra, would be like a guy that you could look down the road and maybe it's like shottzyy with a third ring, Kenny with a third ring, Tiny Terrors with a third ring. They definitely have a case.
Hmm.
Probably to jump Formal and or Clay.
Yeah.
A third ring for any of the 3 guys that we have 7 through 9, in my opinion, would put them over Hecz.
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
think a third ring for the Tiny Terrors or Kenny would put them over Hecz, but and then you could say they would put him over Formal, but once again, the number of wins Formal has is something that could keep him ahead of guys with more rings than him because he does have 23 wins, which is double what any of the Tiny Terrors and Kenny have.
Yeah. And next year's time we'll say how Formal somehow won champs with Uncut again.
That'd be hilarious. If that was the case, I mean, that dude could tie. Maybe he's gonna do it and be like, "Screw it, I'll come back to COD, then I'll go uh COD Halo COD to like mix it up with shottzyy." It'd be funny.
Yeah, that'd be.
I hope Formal comes back though. One of my favorite players of all time.
Hmm.
All right, that's gonna do it for the list, Brock. We're gonna jump into some Black Ops 6 rumors now.
I love it.
So the Black Ops 6 rumors, Brock. I guess not really rumors. A lot of them we like saw were like kind of confirmed, but we have like a potential Black Ops 6 map list. I'm not gonna read a lot of these names because like they're just names of new maps, so that really means nothing to us. Um, Some of the maps though, I one of the maps that just stuck out, Strip Mall. That just seems like it's gonna be like a small Rio type map, and I hope it's a small, really good map like
It
that.
sounds like it.
Sounds colorful, but I don't know. We'll see. In terms of maps, like with names that we recognize, Hacienda potentially on there, Firing Range 2, and Nuketown, which that gets me excited because Firing Range is one of my personal favorite maps, like pubs. The first game I really got into playing a lot of pubs, like and stopped playing Halo and started playing more COD for me was Black Ops 1, obviously, where Firing Range comes from. So I have like a personal, just like, I remember playing a ton of Firing Range. So for me, that map just has like a special place in my heart, kind of like some like MW3 maps because that was like your pubs game.
Yeah.
Firing Range for me, because Black Ops 1 was like my game where I first like grinded pubs. Firing Range is like a special spot in my heart. It's like one of my favorite maps. And then I don't think it's a debate. Some people might think it is. I think Nuketown is easily and far and away no debate. You can't even make an argument. I think it's the best pubs map of all time. For
Hmm.
me personally, I think
That.
Shipment is terrible. I have always said my hot take for pub maps. I think Shipment is awful. It's just good to level up weapons and stuff. The actual map itself isn't even fun to play. you're just like spawning on streaks, spawning into gunfire. Nuketown is like the perfect size. It's big enough that you don't really spawn into shots, but small enough where you're just constantly getting engagements.
Yeah, I would agree. The town is a lot better than shipment.
Yeah, I I'm so excited for Nuketown to be back. It better be back. Um, but interesting, like Hacienda firing range. Obviously not Nuketown for competitive, but Hacienda was a competitive map for both Search and Destroy and Hardpoint in Black Ops 4. Firing range was a Search and Destroy map and stuff in Black Ops 1. I haven't really played firing range competitively because like it hasn't been in any of the more recent games of the competitive map. Um, so for me, that is not something I'm familiar with playing competitive. But that brings up the question, Brock, that I wanted to discuss. Do you want to see old maps in the comp pool again in Black Ops 6? I kind of go like with a caveat, like for this answer. For me, it's I want to see new maps first. Like
Hmm.
if it's available and all the new maps are good, I'd rather just see all new maps. But I think the best case is like we have a ton of good new maps that are also added on with like raid uh,
Hmm.
and standoff or something. Like the best of both worlds to me is we have a giant map pool. So there's 5 maps in every game mode that can be played from the new one, and then maybe there's like one or two of the classic like raid standoff. Those maps added in, uh, or like Hacienda, like those type of maps added in. So to me, it's the best of both worlds. I preferably want the new maps just because it's a new experience, is more fun. But then if we have a bunch of new good maps, we can even add in the classics and make just a super big map pool. That'll make it more fun to play ranked as well as just make it more interesting for vetoes and everything in the CDL.
Yeah, I'm kind of on your thinking. We sure we want these old maps from the past, but we want, like you said, the new maps first, and hopefully they're all pretty good, and then this creates bigger map pools, and teams will have to be good at every map.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I agree with you.
but
Um,
preferably let's see some good new maps in.
yeah, I agree with that. Then Brock, we saw a list of like the confirmed perks in the game. So just kind of reading through some of the perks. There is ninja, move more quietly. The wording on that scares me.
Yeah,
That ninja is move more quietly, not move silently. That worries me a little bit because with sound DQ and that cheese, I don't want my footsteps to make any noise because sound DQ is just gonna be able to sound hurt you. So that does worry me a little bit. Actually, now reading that move more quietly, I wanted that to say move silently.
yeah,
Um, let's see what else is in here. There's like scavenger for perk one classic stuff. An interesting note in here is flak jacket and tack mask are both perk ones along with ninja. That's very interesting.
that is that's weird.
So you obviously can't use flak and tack at the same time, but if you are using them, it seems like you don't have ninja. So I guess in respawn, you're gonna want to be using flak or tack in hardpoint, obviously over ninja. So sounds like you're
Hmm.
gonna have to have loud footsteps if there's like a combat specialty thing, so I don't know how exactly that works. Like, I don't know, and maybe like I said, these are just leaks, so maybe they'll get rearranged around. But Ninja being on the same perk as both Flak and Tack is a little bit worrying to me. Obviously, Ghost is in there. Then perk twos, you got like Dexterity, Gung Ho, Tracker, Engineer, pretty classic ones.
Yep.
Fast Hands. Perk three in terms of competitive. I mean, you're not gonna be able to use this Vigilance one. That's gonna be banned. Bankroll, extra points towards your streaks. That's banned. Um,
Yep.
Cold blooded could maybe be used. Quartermaster, that's probably banned. Gearhead, two field upgrades, that's going to be banned. Guardian's going to be banned. Faster healing when you're holding an objective, that's banned. So pretty much you're probably going to have to use double time as a perk three if they stay this way. Greatly increased duration of attack sprint.
Yeah, all that sounds like GA to
Yeah,
me.
all of it's pretty much gone except double time.
Yep.
Um, the interesting thing is this perk combat specialty. That's a new thing, Brock. Um, So it's showing that one of them is called Enforcer, which means killing enemies grants a temporary buff to movement speed and or health regenerate. That's GA'd.
Yeah, I
And a
just
player's moving faster and regenning faster. That also sounds like hell for pubs, not gonna lie. Somebody's just constantly regenning their health.
Yeah, sounds like I want to use that.
Then the recon one, enemies can be seen through walls for a short time after
Banned.
respawn, banned. The strategist one, earn a score bonus for objectives of destroying enemy content through walls a short distance, deploy equipment and field upgrades faster. That's like maybe the only one that could be used depending on if it's score streaks or kill streaks.
Yeah.
If it's kill streaks, that one could be used because like the score bonus won't really matter. It'll just be like you deploy equipment and field upgrades faster. But honestly, maybe all those, if there's a way to use none of them, those might all be GA'd out in competitive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um, there are wild cards that have been leaked. Overkill, everybody pretty much knows what that is. You can carry two primary weapons. Um, Gunfighter, which gives you 3 extra attachments. So I'm assuming that means the classes, like we've seen, are going to be 5 attachments per gun, like they are this year. And then you could just make it 8 attachments if you use Gunfighter. And then Perk Greed is equipping an extra perk. So there we go, Brock. That would be our solution for the wild cards. So Overkill, you're obviously not going to be able to use that in competitive. You never can. Gunfighter, that's probably going to be banned.
Yeah.
Stacking your weapon. So that answers our question. Perk Greed. You can equip an extra perk, so you just run Ninja and then one of Flak or Tack. So that makes a little more sense now.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And then in pubs, you probably run like Ghost and Ninja or something.
Hmm. Yeah.
But that makes a lot more sense now. With Perk Greed, you can then use Ninja as well as Tack or Flak. That makes a lot more sense. That makes me feel a lot better.
Uh-huh. Yeah. I'm about to say like all those good perks in the one slot.
Yeah, that would have been a little crazy, but that makes a little more sense now. As long as I would assume perk read will be available to be used, and then Brock, and also like it perk read will be interesting though. Now that you think about it too, because like for respawn, you don't really need to use ninja. Like
Hmm.
you can just run around, especially for the pros on land and everything. You might be able to just run double flak tack, which would be very interesting because then obviously stuns and nades a lot less useful in terms of actually getting kills with the nades with everybody has flak on, but also has tack. Trophy usage and stuff maybe a little bit less important, but I don't know. It's interesting. Flak attack is kind of fun to be able to use both at the same time when you're playing ranked yourself because you can just run around and not be as affected by everything.
Yeah. It feels like superhuman.
Yeah, pretty much. And then Brock, I mentioned it early, but one of the weirdest gameplay leaks we maybe ever seen. Just
Yeah. You'd say
dude
so.
Dude has a jailbroken PS4 and just goes live on Kick and is just playing for like a long time, just like playing through the maps. And honestly, for being on a jailbroken PS4, game looked decent. Brock, we saw some slide cancel that looked pretty good. The
Of
game just
that.
looks like a classic um, Treyarch feel to it. Just like when you're looking at it, like the guns, everything just has that like Treyarch feel to it. So I'm very very excited for that. Unfortunately, like the tax sprint, like we said in the game, Omni movement is interesting, something to learn. But very excited. Saw side canceling, saw the gameplay. I'm really excited to get my hands on the beta, and I mean it's Treyarch. I expect them to hit, and I'm also really excited for zombies. We're not people that know a ton about zombies, but we have one friend who just loves zombies, and for that reason, we played enough.
Hmm.
There's another zombies league. I don't really know. Like I said, not too much of like a zombies person, like with all the leaks and everything. I'm sure if you are a zombies person, though, this is like got to be the most exciting releases because you're just like sitting here waiting for all this info that can come out. Because as we know, like from our friend that loves zombies a lot, there is so much to that world and that story that like all the lore and everything behind it. There's just so much backstory to like the whole zombies universe. So if you're a person that's a fan of that, like these releases have to have you like. I'm so excited for the release for like a ranked play and having like a Treyarch game, and like I always like playing pubs in those games the most. I can't even imagine how excited you are for zombies because you really only get like a true zombies release every time Treyarch releases a game. So you even have to wait more than we do. We at
Yeah.
least get a new COD every year, but like if you're a zombies fan, I can't imagine how excited you must be for this game. I would be if I was. And I
Mm-hmm.
like to play zombies, but I'm not like the biggest zombies fan like a lot of people out there are.
Yeah. We're not. We're just like very, very casual zombies players.
I basically hop in with our friend that loves to play, and I'm like, I'll do the Easter egg with you, but you just have to do all the steps. I'll run around, get all the kills for you, and just like high round with him and stuff.
Yep.
But that's exciting, and I don't know the gameplay from what we saw. It's a jailbroken PS4 recorded in low quality, but everything looks and feels like Treyarch to me, and I'm excited to get my hands on it and play it because I have never played a bad Treyarch game.
Hmm. And I believe I saw there was a top three at the end of the game.
Yeah, kind of like the BO3 vibe.
Yeah. So should be interesting if that is correct.
Yeah. I maybe they'll bring like the little dances back.
Yeah, those dances were so funny to do back in the day.
Yeah, so but like they were like putting all like that like all like the trending dances at the time were just getting dropped in. It was like Fortnite before Fortnite.
Yeah, and I'm just like you said, I'm very excited to see how the game is and play the beta and play the game, and it's probably gonna be good.
Yeah, I'm very, 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 very excited. You got anything else though before we wrap it up, Brock?
Um, no, not really. Just want this Black Ops 6 to come out sooner than later.
Before we know it, it'll be here all of a sudden. It's like an end of October release, or about 2.5 ish months away.
Hmm.
And I literally cannot wait. I've been waiting for a Treyarch game. I mean, since Cold War. Um, been waiting and waiting and waiting. It's always the best COD. It's always the best ranked COD. It's always the best outside content like zombies. Like we said, usually the League is the most entertaining. I mean, like Black Ops 3, Black Ops 4, Cold War were all incredible years in the League in
Yep.
terms of like how fun it was to watch the game. So yeah, I can't wait.
Same here.
All right, that's gonna do it for this one. If you guys enjoyed, be sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe on YouTube. If you're on the audio platforms, drop a follow, drop a 5-star review. Drop your top 10 list down below. Like we said, it's a heavy debated topic right now. We'll probably do like a list of just like pure individual talent, like we said, from what we've seen with our own two eyes. It'll just be like a completely opinion and feel thing. No accolades to back it up, rings, wins, none of that will be accounted for. And there could be some crazy, interesting honorable mentions like Dylan Cod, Black Ops 4 peak, random
Yeah.
things like that. Where it's like we saw this guy pop off. How high does he rank on the peaks? And obviously, extremely, extremely short lived peak. Um, but yeah, that's gonna do it for this one. Like I said, if you guys enjoyed, be sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe on YouTube. And we will see you guys in the next one. Probably talking esports World Cup. So we'll see you guys in the next one.